You know what hurts the most? When the person you die for is the one holding the knife. When I first heard Michael's story, I didn't believe it. Two brothers, close since childhood, raised by a single mother who taught them that family was everything. But what happened between them? It was darker than anyone could imagine. Michael was the older one, the protector. The kind of brother who'd walk miles in the rain just to pick up his little brother from school. And Daniel, he was the quiet one, the dreamer. Always chasing approval, always trying to be seen. They grew up in the same house, shared the same meals, slept in the same cramped room, yet somehow one of them would grow to hate the other so much that it would destroy their entire family. It started with something small, it always does. A promotion, a woman, a lie. And before anyone could understand what was happening, blood turned cold. See, betrayal doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, through jealousy, through silence, through all the things we never say out loud. Michael thought he knew his brother. But what he didn't know was that Daniel had been planning something for years. Something that would make him question everything. His family, his faith, his own heart. And the craziest part? Daniel didn't even see it as revenge. He saw it as justice. You know, Michael and Daniel didn't have much growing up, but what they did have, they shared. Their mother, Evelyn, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and waiting tables at night, to keep food on the table. The boys used to stay by the window every evening, counting the cars that passed by until she came home. She always came home tired but smiling, holding takeout leftovers in a paper bag. And no matter how small it was, a slice of pie, a sandwich half, she always gave it to Michael first. "Your big brother needs to stay strong," she'd say, ruffling Daniel's hair. It was innocent, just a mother trying to take care of her boys. But that one habit planted a seed, a small, quiet thing that would grow into something ugly years later. Because Daniel noticed. He always noticed. Whenever Michael got praised for helping around the house, Daniel was told to learn from his brother. Whenever teachers called home with good news, it was Michael's name they mentioned. And when Daniel brought home a drawing he'd worked on for days, Evelyn smiled politely, but her eyes still lingered on Michael, her pride, her hope. At first, Daniel didn't hate him. He admired him. Michael was everything he wanted to be, confident, dependable, and loved. But admiration can rot into resentment if you water it long enough. Years passed. The brothers grew older, but that invisible wall between them thickened. Michael got a scholarship. Daniel didn't. Michael left for college. Daniel stayed behind, working part-time jobs to help their mother pay bills. Phone calls from Michael became less frequent. When they did talk, it was always the same. Michael talking about his new life, his new friends, his new opportunities. Daniel would listen, smile, and say, "I'm proud of you, man." And then hang up, staring at his reflection in the dark window, asking himself why no one ever said that to him. He told himself he didn't care. That he was fine staying home, that success wasn't everything. But late at night, he'd scroll through social media, looking at photos of his brother in suits, shaking hands, smiling beside people who seemed important, while he was still sweeping floors in a hardware store. That's when it started to change. The admiration was gone. What was left was envy, cold, silent, patient envy. And deep down, Daniel promised himself one thing. One day he'd be the one on top. And when that day came, Michael would finally know what it felt like to be overlooked. What hurts the most? When the person you die for is the one holding the knife. When I first heard Michael's story, I didn't believe it. 2 brothers, close since childhood, raised by a single mother who taught them that family was everything. But what happened between them? It was darker than anyone could imagine. Michael was the older one, the protector. The kind of brother who'd walk miles in the rain to pick up his little brother from school. And Daniel, he was the quiet one, the dreamer. Always chasing approval, always trying to be seen. They grew up in the same house, shared the same meals, slept in the same cramped room, yet somehow one of them would grow to hate the other so much that it would destroy their entire family. It started with something small, it always does. A promotion, a woman, a lie. And before anyone could understand what was happening, blood turned cold. See, betrayal doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, through jealousy, through silence, through all the things we never say out loud. Michael thought he knew his brother. But what he didn't know was that Daniel had been planning something for years. Something that would make him question everything. His family, his faith, his own heart. And the craziest part? Daniel didn't even see it as revenge. He saw it as justice. When Michael finally came back home, it had been almost 5 years. He had a job in a clean suit, a company car, and that same easy smile that everyone seemed to love. Evelyn cried when she saw him. Daniel just stood there, half smiling, half wondering if his brother even remembered what their old life felt like. At dinner, Michael spoke about New York, his new life, and the people he met. He laughed easily, his voice filling the room. Evelyn looked at him like he hung the moon. Daniel barely touched his food. Later that night, while Michael unpacked gifts, cologne for Mom, a watch for Daniel, Daniel found himself staring at his brother's reflection in the mirror. The same face, the same blood, but somehow it felt like they were from two different worlds. "Man, you've really made it," Daniel said, forcing a grin. Michael laughed, clapped him on the shoulder. "You'll get there too, bro. You just gotta find your thing." Those words cut deeper than Michael could ever know. Because Daniel had been trying. He'd worked at the same factory for years. Every time he thought he was getting ahead, something pushed him back. Layoffs, bills, life. And now here was Michael talking about finding his thing like success was as easy as picking out a shirt. From that day, something in Daniel hardened. He started watching his brother more closely, how people reacted to him, how they respected him. And then he saw something that made his pulse quicken. Her name was Isabella. A woman from Michael's office, kind, soft-spoken, and the first person in a long time who looked at Daniel like he wasn't invisible. At first it was harmless. Michael brought her home one weekend for dinner. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, complimented his cooking, said he seemed more real than most guys she knew. But that tiny compliment was enough. For Daniel it was oxygen. He started thinking about her more than he should have. And one night, when Michael dropped her off after a late meeting, Daniel was the one who walked her to her door. That night they talked for hours, about family, struggle, and how hard it was to live in someone else's shadow. When she touched his hand, he didn't pull away. He told himself it was nothing. But when she didn't stop him from leaning in, he didn't stop either. It was supposed to be one mistake. But for Daniel it felt like justice. Every part of him that had been bruised by comparison, by being overlooked, by watching his brother win again and again, that night, it felt like he finally took something back. But what Daniel didn't realize was that revenge never ends where you think it will. It only opens a door that you can't close again. Because what started that night was the beginning of the end. Months passed. The air in the house had changed, you could feel it. Michael still smiled, still called his brother Dan, but there was a quiet distance between them now. Something unsaid hung in every conversation. Daniel avoided eye contact most days. He told himself it was guilt, but part of him still believed he'd done nothing wrong. After all, hadn't Michael taken enough already? Then one evening it happened. Evelyn called for a family dinner. She said it had been too long since they all sat together. Michael agreed, said he'd bring Isabella. Daniel froze for a second but nodded. The moment Isabella walked in, Daniel's chest tightened. She wore a simple blue dress, her smile soft, but her eyes told a story only he could read. Throughout dinner, Daniel barely spoke. Every laugh Michael shared with her felt like a blade twisting in his chest. Isabella kept glancing at Daniel, nervous, trying to act normal, but guilt has its own kind of perfume. Everyone can eventually smell it. After dessert, Michael stepped outside to take a call. The moment he did, Isabella turned to Daniel. "Daniel, we can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. He leaned in, eyes sharp. "You think he'll forgive you? Or me?" "It's already done, Bella." Tears welled up in her eyes. "He doesn't deserve this. You don't know what you've started." Before Daniel could answer, the back door creaked open. Michael stood there, silent, phone still in hand. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Michael spoke, his voice quiet, too quiet. "What exactly can't you keep doing?" Daniel's heart dropped. Isabella stammered, tried to explain, but Michael already knew. You could see it in his eyes, the realization, the betrayal, the disbelief. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just walked out. Daniel followed him to the driveway. "Michael, wait." Michael turned, eyes red. "You? Of all people, Daniel? My own brother?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "You took everything from me. You always have. This was the only thing that was ever mine." Michael shook his head slowly. "You think this is revenge?" "No, this is self-destruction." Then he got in his car and drove off. That night, Daniel sat in the dark, staring at the wall. He thought revenge would make him feel powerful, that it would balance the scales. But all he felt was emptiness. Because when you betray blood, you don't just lose them. You lose yourself. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Michael and Daniel became deafening. Michael had moved out of their shared home and stopped answering calls. Isabella disappeared too. No texts. No goodbyes. Just gone. At first, Daniel tried to convince himself he didn't care. He told himself Michael would get over it, that he was the one finally in control. But deep down he knew he'd set something in motion he couldn't stop. Late at night, Daniel would scroll through old pictures of him and Michael. Birthdays, graduations, road trips. Michael's hand was always on his shoulder. He used to think that the hand was holding him down. Now he realized, maybe it was holding him up. Then one rainy afternoon Daniel got a call. It was Evelyn, their mother. Her voice cracked through the static. "Daniel, it's your brother. He's in the hospital." He didn't even hang up before running out the door. When he got there he found Michael sitting on a hospital bed, arm in a sling, a bandage across his forehead. Apparently he'd been in a car accident, the same night he drove away. The nurse said he was lucky to be alive. Daniel stood there, frozen, watching his brother, bruised, tired, yet somehow still calm. Michael looked up, meeting his eyes. "Did you come to make sure I'm still breathing?" he said, half smiling but with no warmth. Daniel tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Michael looked away. "You meant every bit of it." Silence. Then Michael pulled a small photo from his pocket, a picture of Isabella. He stared at it, then at Daniel. "She left, you know. Said she couldn't live with what happened. Neither can I." He tucked the photo back into his pocket and closed his eyes. "I forgive you, Daniel, but I don't ever want to see you again." And those few quiet words, hit harder than any punch. Daniel left the hospital that night drenched in rain, but it felt like it was washing something away. The hate, the pride, the illusion that revenge ever gave him power. But life wasn't done with him yet. Because a month later he got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just his name on the envelope, written in neat, familiar handwriting. He opened it. It was from Isabella. "Daniel, by the time you read this I'll be far away. I couldn't stay and watch what I destroyed. But there's something you need to know, something that changes everything. Meet me at the old pier tomorrow evening. Come alone." Daniel's heart pounded as he folded the letter. He stared out the window, the rain still falling, and for the first time in a long while he didn't know what to expect. Was this closure? Or another wound waiting to open? The next evening the sky over the harbor bled shades of gray and orange, the kind of sunset that looks tired, like it's seen too much. Daniel stood by the old pier, the wooden planks creaking under his shoes. The smell of salt and rust filled the air. Boats swayed lazily in the water, ropes groaning with the current. He checked his watch. 6:48 p.m. Isabella said, "Tomorrow evening," and she was never one to be late. He waited. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound made him turn, footsteps, seagulls, waves hitting the rocks. Then he saw her. Isabella walked toward him slowly, her hair tied up, a worn denim jacket hugging her shoulders. She looked thinner, older somehow, like the past had been feeding on her too. They stood there for a long time, neither speaking. Finally Daniel said softly, "You look different." She smiled sadly. "So do you." The silence stretched between them again. The wind carried the sound of distant horns and crashing waves. Daniel's throat tightened. "Why did you call me here, Bella?" She looked down, fingers gripping the letter she'd sent him. "Because there's something you need to know before you go on hating yourself." Her eyes met his, watery but steady. Michael, he knew. Daniel frowned. "Knew what?" "About us." For a second the world stopped. The waves, the wind, everything. "What do you mean he knew?" Daniel asked, voice breaking. "He found out months before that night at dinner. But he didn't say anything because he thought confronting you would destroy your bond. He loved you too much to lose you over me." Daniel took a step back, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible. He wouldn't just." Isabella interrupted. "He told me that he planned to leave me quietly without blaming either of us. He wanted us to be happy, Daniel." Her voice cracked at the end and tears rolled down her cheeks. Daniel stood there, frozen, every nerve in his body buzzing with disbelief. Michael knew. All along. He thought back to the hospital, the forgiveness, the calm, the quiet resignation. It wasn't weakness. It was understanding. Daniel felt something collapse inside him, not anger this time but grief. A deep, hollow kind of grief that no apology could ever fill. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked quietly. "Because I couldn't live with the lie anymore," she whispered. "He didn't die hating you, Daniel. He died loving you." Daniel's eyes snapped up. "What?" Isabella swallowed hard. "The accident, it wasn't just an accident. He didn't make it. He passed 2 weeks after you saw him at the hospital." The words hit like a wave, Cold, merciless, final. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He stepped forward, gripping the railing, staring into the black water below. He could barely breathe. The man he hated, envied, betrayed, had died with love in his heart. And all Daniel could think was how badly he wished he could trade every ounce of revenge just to hear his brother's voice one more time. The pier lights flickered on, bathing everything in a soft orange glow. Isabella placed a small pendant in his hand, a silver cross. "He wanted you to have this," she said. "He told me if anything ever happened to give it back to you." Daniel stared at it, his reflection trembling in the dark water. In that moment he realized, revenge didn't just take Michael. It took everything. The next morning, Daniel woke up before the sun. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No ringing phone, no laughter, no one calling his name. Just the sound of the clock ticking over and over, like it was counting down to something he couldn't escape. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the pendant in his hand. The silver cross Michael left him had started to tarnish, its shine fading, just like everything else in Daniel's life. He hadn't spoken to anyone since the night at the pier. He stopped going to work, stopped eating. It was like every sound, every face reminded him of Michael. One afternoon he drove to their old neighborhood, the one where they used to play basketball on cracked concrete and race bikes down empty streets. The trees looked smaller now, the houses more faded. He parked by the curb and just sat there, watching kids play where he and Michael once did. He thought about how his brother would push him when he fell, then pull him back up with that same grin. That same grin he'd never see again. The memories came in waves, not just of anger or jealousy but of all the moments he'd ignored. The late-night talks. The advice Michael gave. The times he stood up for him when no one else did. He'd spent his whole life trying to beat his brother. He never realized he'd already lost the moment he stopped loving him. That night, Daniel sat at his desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. He started writing a letter, not to Isabella, not to anyone else but to Michael. "Dear Mike, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Maybe this is just for me. But I need to say I'm sorry not just for what I did, but for who I became. You were right. Revenge doesn't fix anything. It just burns everything around you until there's nothing left but ash. I thought I was getting even. Instead, I lost the only person who ever believed in me." He paused, staring at the words. Then he folded the paper and placed it inside the pendant's small box. The next morning he drove to Michael's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the grass still damp with dew. He knelt down, tracing his brother's name on the headstone. "Hey big bro," he whispered. The wind brushed against his face like an answer. Daniel took a deep breath and placed the pendant on the grave. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said softly. "But I'm still going to live like you'd want me to. I owe you that much." For the first time in years he didn't cry. He just stood there, eyes red, heart heavy, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. As he turned to leave he noticed someone standing by the cemetery gate, Evelyn, their mother. She looked older, thinner, her eyes swollen from tears that probably never stopped. She walked up to him slowly. "You look tired," she said gently. He nodded. "Yeah, I am." Then she placed a hand on his cheek. "Michael wouldn't want you to carry this forever." Daniel looked down, fighting back the guilt. "I don't know how to let it go." Evelyn's voice broke. "You don't let it go, son. You live with it, and you make it mean something." Those words stayed with him for days. 2 months had passed since Daniel last visited the cemetery. He'd started working again, quietly, humbly. Not in the same company he once shared with Michael, but at a small auto shop by the edge of town. He liked the silence there, the hum of engines, the smell of oil and metal. It was work that didn't require talking. Work that didn't remind him of what he'd lost. Every night, he'd sit by his window, staring at the pendant's empty box. He told himself he'd done the right thing, leaving it with Michael, leaving everything behind. But guilt has a way of whispering even when the world is quiet. One rainy afternoon, as Daniel locked up the shop, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Still fixing broken things, huh?" He turned around, and there she was. Isabella. For a second the world tilted. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes plain, her eyes softer but heavier with sadness. "Bella?" he breathed out. "What are you doing here?" She gave a weak smile. "I wasn't sure if I should come. But there's something I need to tell you before I disappear again." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the rain filling the space between them. Daniel sighed. "I thought you already told me everything." Isabella shook her head. "Not everything." She stepped closer. "Michael didn't just forgive you. He left something behind for you, something I couldn't bring myself to give you that day at the pier. She pulled a small, sealed envelope from her jacket. The handwriting was unmistakable, Michael's. Daniel's hands trembled as he took it. He didn't open it right away. He just stared at the name written on the front. To my brother, Daniel? He finally tore it open, his breath unsteady. Danny? If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But that's okay. You and I both knew we were running from different kinds of pain. I know what you did. I understand why you did it. And even if it broke me, I still understand because I've been jealous of you too. You always had a fire in you that I never did. I just learned to hide it behind a smile. Please don't waste the rest of your life trying to fix what happened between us. Just be the man I always believed you could be. Take care of Mom. Take care of yourself. And remember, love is never weakness. It's the only thing that makes forgiveness possible. Your brother, Michael. By the time Daniel finished reading, his tears had soaked the paper. He looked up, the rain running down his face, mixing with the salt of his grief. Isabella stood there, crying too, quietly like someone who'd already done too much of it. I should have told you sooner, she said softly. But I was scared you'd hate me even more. Daniel shook his head slowly. I don't hate you, Bella. I hate what we did. I hate what it costs. She took a deep breath. Then maybe it's time to stop running from it. Daniel folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. For the first time, his chest didn't feel like it was collapsing. The guilt was still there, but it was taking on a different shape. It wasn't a weight anymore. It was a reminder. He looked at Isabella and said, let's start over. Not as what we were, but as two people who finally learned what pain costs. She smiled faintly. Do you think we can? Daniel nodded. Michael would have wanted us to. They stood there, under the rain, not as lovers, not as enemies, just two broken souls finally trying to breathe again. The next morning, the sun rose over the city in streaks of orange and gold, slicing through the clouds that had hung heavy all week. Daniel drove to the cemetery once again, the pendant tucked in his pocket, Michael's letter in his hand. Each step toward the grave felt heavier than the last, but he moved forward anyway. He knelt beside Michael's headstone, brushing away the small pile of fallen leaves. The words carved in stone seemed to mock him and comfort him at the same time. Michael James, beloved brother, forever in our hearts. Daniel placed the pendant gently on the stone, feeling its cold weight settle into his palm. I'm sorry, Mike, he whispered. For everything, the jealousy, the lies, the betrayal. I let my pride turn me into someone I don't even recognize. I hope you can see that I'm trying to be better now. The wind stirred around him, carrying the distant sound of birds and the soft hum of the city beyond the cemetery gates. He thought about all the things he'd lost. Isabella, the years of friendship and trust, the childhood they could never get back, and felt a deep ache in his chest. But then, somewhere beneath the pain, he felt something new, a quiet kind of strength. Michael's words from the letter echoed in his mind. Love is never weakness. It's the only thing that makes forgiveness possible. Daniel took a deep breath, standing tall for the first time in months. He looked around at the cemetery, at the graves of people who had lived, struggled, and loved, and realized that grief didn't have to chain him. It could guide him. He took out his phone and called Evelyn. Mom, he said, his voice trembling, I'm ready. I want to come home. I want to help. I want to make things right. Her sobs over the phone nearly broke him again, but this time they weren't of sorrow, they were relief. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he was reconnecting with the family he had almost destroyed. After hanging up, he closed his eyes, letting the sun wash over his face. He imagined Michael there beside him, smiling, shaking his head like he always did when Daniel tried to do something reckless. I'll make you proud, Mike, he whispered. I swear I will. Then he turned and walked away from the grave, stepping into the bright morning light. The weight of revenge and regret was still there, yes, but it no longer controlled him. It was a reminder of what he had lost, and of everything he still had the chance to rebuild. As he walked down the path toward the city, he felt the wind at his back, like someone invisible was guiding him forward. The past was heavy, but the future was his to shape. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel finally believed he could get it right. Months had passed since that morning at the cemetery. Daniel had moved back home, slowly rebuilding his relationship with Evelyn. They cooked together, laughed occasionally, and sometimes just sat in silence, each understanding the unspoken truth that Michael would never return. Work at the auto shop kept him grounded, gave him purpose. But the real work was inside, untangling the years of bitterness, regret, and envy that had almost consumed him. Isabella never returned. She sent a letter one day telling him she had moved across the country, starting fresh, trying to heal in her own way. Daniel read it over and over, finally letting himself wish her well without jealousy or anger. And then, in quiet moments, evenings when the sun bled pink across the horizon, Daniel would pull out Michael's pendant. He traced the silver cross with his thumb, remembering the warmth of his brother's smile, the way he had always believed in him, even when Daniel had betrayed him. It was strange, he didn't feel broken anymore. Not entirely. He felt changed. Forged by guilt, by grief, by love, by betrayal. He had walked through the fire of his own mistakes and somehow survived. Sometimes, Daniel would walk alone to the pier where he'd met Isabella that last time. The water shimmered under the streetlights, and he could almost hear Michael's voice, laughing, teasing, reminding him not to take life so seriously. And in those moments he would whisper a silent promise. "I will live, Mike. I will honor you, and I will never forget what love and family really mean." Because Daniel finally understood, revenge could destroy, betrayal could wound, and loss could hollow you out. But love endures. It lingers in memory, in the choices we make, in the quiet strength we carry forward. The story didn't end with vengeance. It ended with reflection. With growth. With the haunting understanding that some wounds never fully close. But some lessons last a lifetime. As the city lights flickered in the distance and the waves lapped quietly against the pier, Daniel took a deep breath and let the weight of the past settle, not as chains but as a reminder to live differently. And in that silence he finally felt free. Please subscribe and turn on your notifications.